In the Unresolved Problems segment tonight, what's starting to look like a trend of violent teen mobs causing chaos in some urban areas across the country? In Philadelphia last week, about 40 young thugs went into a Sears store, then they stole thousands of dollars worth of merchandise in broad daylight. 16 kids were arrested, and believe it or not, one of them was only 11 years old. There have been similar problems in Chicago, in Atlanta, in New Orleans, and in Las Vegas. Joining us now from New York, Curtis Sliwa, radio host and founder of the Guardian Angels, and Cooper Lawrence, also a radio host. Curtis, look, you've been at this for a long time, watching criminal trends across the United States. How do police stay ahead of this situation? When you get one message going out on the internet, suddenly, an hour later, you have 100, maybe 200 people gathering, and it overwhelms the authorities on the scene.
Well, Laura, this started actually in Philadelphia with art students who were texting and emailing and Facebooking and socially networking because they wanted to do people art. So from Drexel and all the universities, they assembled, and all of a sudden 10 became 100, 100 became 1,000. And the homies saw this and said, yo, I got that same technology, wireless. And then all of a sudden these wolf packs, because those were the terms used, wolf packing, wilding, has suddenly become this mobbing up in which all of a sudden you get people who are tweeting as the biggest twits in the world on Twitter, and then also obviously emailing and Facebooking, and I mean, it becomes a mad rush. They hit a place like South Street in Philadelphia, the North Shore, right along Lake Michigan in Chicago, and like locusts through the cornfield, they buzz through because they know the percentages are that maybe 20 will get caught, hundreds will run free, and then it's snitches get stitches and end up in ditches. No one's supposed to rat anyone out. They try to keep to that code of the streets.
Well, that sounded like a Jesse Jackson formulation right at the end. I was trying to follow that sentence. Okay, I get it. I get what you're saying. What can police do, Cooper? How do they stay ahead of this? Is there any way that authorities can stay ahead of this? Because, look, you see that shopping mall scene. You go into a store, what are the clerks? These guys are making minimum wage. You know, they're 19, they're just off of, break from school, and they're getting, a few bucks to work. And suddenly you get 75, disaffected youth showing up to loot the store.
I think it's very important for police and all of us to understand who these kids are and why they're doing what they do. There's a great deal of research on this, and what it shows is that kids are either what they call adolescent limited or life course persistent. The adolescent limited kids are between 7 and 17, and you see as they get older it escalates where they become more interested in antisocial behavior, but then at 17 it starts to drop off and eventually they become normal citizens. But there's a small percentage that love the crime. They start young and they keep at crime as long as they can, and they're the ones that instigate these other kids. So you get kids that are interested in crime, finding kids that, maybe
thugs.
Playing around with it, the thugs, right?
Yeah,
and they find the
thugs.
kids that are just a little interested, and they get them involved in these large groups.
Yeah.
So it's very important for police to understand who the real criminals are here and get to them to stop them from encouraging the younger kids and even younger. You mentioned 11. I mean, that's ridiculous, right? But that's about the age. That's the
Recruits.
pivotal age that curiosity starts.
Well, Curtis, look, here's where we are today. We have a rampant fatherlessness problem in the United States of America, where there's so many. And this cuts across racial and gender lines, where we have one-parent households, and we have a real problem with family breakdown. This happens across socioeconomic lines, but it especially happens, as Bill Cosby and so many have talked about, happens in these inner city, poorer areas where there are no guardrails for the kids. They don't have a family structure, so they look for father figures in these gangs. I mean, again, you've been working in this area for decades now, and the problem has gotten worse, Curtis, not better, with the family breakdown. I think it all goes back to the family.
Yeah, but Laura, you can create the alternative, as I have the Guardian Angels in now 14 countries, 140 cities, to give youngsters the alternative, rather than be gangbangers, rather than be antisocial. But it still comes down to when all of a sudden this mob gets rolling and flash mobbing, you have to use the language that they universally understand, whether they're the young huckleberries or they're the Fagin-like adults who are leading this effort. Pain compliance. The cops can't be punching donuts out there. They got to be busting their shoes. And the way they do that is give a few wooden shampoos, a few attitudinal readjustments out there where they're sucking concrete outside of the mall, outside of the store. And you'll see how quick that antisocial behavior will stop, because that's the language they universally understand. Then you can get into the nitty-gritty of why the furniture is upstairs and rearranged in the wrong rooms, and they have become enemies of society.
Yeah, so you have to control the problem first, and then you can analyze, why it's happening. And Cooper, I mean, I think there's something to that, right? I mean, they're doing it because they know they can get away with it. Curtis is absolutely right.
He's absolutely right.
A percentage will go to with an organization, a faith-based organization, or guardian angels, and they'll actually get affiliated with someone who's going to say, look, don't act like a jerk. This is going to ruin your life. But the rest of these kids, they're going to gravitate towards something like this because they can get away with it. What do authorities do with this internet, this flashing, the flash mobbing? What do they do? I don't know what the authorities can do at this point.
Well, Curtis found a very creative way to say consequences. That's it. The children have to understand consequences. These are kids that don't grasp the consequences of the action, so we have to show them these are consequences and they're serious consequences.
Laura,
I didn't like.
Laura,
go ahead, Curtis.
One quick thing: what you do is you throw some of these kids coin, and trust me, they'll rat out the others. They're part of the network. You get your kids who want to be cops, who are buffs, who are explorers, get them on the network and get them to rat them out, so that the cops preemptively swoop in. They got all the paddy wagons. They grab the leaders, and without the leaders, these flash mobs cannot effectively then get out of control.
Right. All right. Great strategy, Curtis Cooper. Great to see.